Imagine a birthday cake.
Meh.
But I don't want you to picture it sitting on a table, covered in frosting with the candles flickering or anything like that.
Right.
I want you to picture it unbaked.
Unbaked, yeah.
Unbaked. It exists entirely as an idea. It's a box of mix on a pantry shelf, maybe some eggs in the carton in the fridge, and it's a promise.
A promise made between a mother and her son.
Exactly. The date is March 2020. We're in Baltimore, Maryland, and Keyonta Davis has just turned 21.
And 21 is, that's such a massive threshold.
It really is.
It's the legal gateway to adulthood. It's the moment the world essentially tells you that you are entirely your own person.
Yeah, it's a huge milestone.
Yeah.
So Keyonta goes to visit his mother, Angie, and they have this ritual.
Like a birthday ritual.
Right. It's intimate. It's specific just to them. They make this concrete plan where he's going to come back the very next day and she is going to bake him that cake. It's the kind of small domestic detail that really anchors you, especially when you remember what was happening in the world at that exact moment.
It is such a grounding detail to start with.
Yeah.
Because March 2020,
Oh, man.
that was the onset of pure chaos. I think you and I and everyone listening, we all remember that feeling in the air.
The uncertainty.
Exactly. The world is locking down. There's this massive panic about a new virus. The grocery store shelves are completely empty. But for this family, the focus is hyper-local.
Yeah, it's not about the pandemic at all for them that day.
Right, it's about a mother, a son, and a birthday tradition.
So the plan is set. The next day arrives. Keyonta goes to his job. He's working part-time, which, by the way, is a detail we are going to explore deeply in a little bit.
Definitely.
And he calls Angie during his lunch break. Everything is standard.
Standard check-in.
Yeah, he's just checking in. He sounds totally fine. But then
Sun goes down.
the sun goes down. The batter is ready to go. The oven is preheated. But Keyonta never walks through the door.
Yeah.
The cake never gets baked. And that phone call during his lunch break,
The cliff edge.
that was the cliff edge.
Yeah.
That was the last time Angie ever heard her son's voice. He is never heard from again.
And this is where we really have to stop and reframe what we're doing here today.
Yeah.
Because if you just read the local headline, or if you just saw a flyer on a telephone pole somewhere, this looks like a heartbreaking, but unfortunately common missing persons case.
Right. You see it all the time.
But when you apply the deep dive lens to Keyonta Davis's disappearance, you find something much more systemic.
Much deeper.
Exactly. This isn't just a mystery about where a young man went. It is a case study on what sociologists and criminologists call the invisible missing.
The invisible missing. That is a heavy concept.
Yes.
It's one of those terms that feels like it explains everything and nothing all at once until you really dig into it. So what is our actual mission for this deep dive? What are we trying to achieve by telling Keyonta's story?
Our mission is to use Keyonta's story as a complete audit of the system. We are just recounting a timeline of events today. We are examining the friction, the grinding, sparks-flying friction between family intuition and police bureaucracy.
The disconnect there.
Huge disconnect. We are looking at the specific, dangerous vulnerability of adults with disabilities who are trying to live independently.
Yeah.
And we're going to look at why a family saying something is wrong often just isn't enough to get the gears of justice turning. Specifically when the person missing falls into certain demographic categories.
Which is so frustrating. Now, we have a stack of sources to help us navigate this, and I want you, the listener, to know exactly where we are getting our information today.
Right, lay it out.
We've got the actual police bulletins from the Baltimore Police Department. We have detailed summaries and transcripts from the Vanished podcast.
Specifically episode 516.
Yes, episode 516, which is crucial because it features actual interviews with Keyonta's mother, Angie.
That primary source testimony is just invaluable.
You really can't replace it. And we also have criminological analysis regarding the golden hour of investigations and the sociology of urban disappearances.
And I'll be totally honest, when you cross-reference these documents,
Oh, boy.
when you lay the police reports right next to the family's testimony, there are moments that are genuinely baffling.
Baffling is a polite word for it.
You see gaps that simply shouldn't exist.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because the central question staring us in the face is not just where is he?
Right.
It's how does a 21-year-old man who is in constant contact with his mother just vanish in the middle of a major American city with almost no initial official trail?
To answer that, we really have to understand the human being behind the case number.
Hmm.
We have to strip away the statistics and build a profile of who Keyonta Davis actually was.
Who he was on a daily basis.
Exactly. Because if we don't understand who he was, we just can't understand why the system reacted or failed to react the way it did.
Right. So let's look at the biology and the sociology. Let's build
Yeah.
the profile. Keyonta Davis, 21 years old. Physically, he's a presence. He is 6'1", 180 pounds.
That physical description is not just a detail for a poster.
No.
It's a massive factor in how the system perceives risk. In media studies and criminology, everyone knows about missing white woman syndrome.
Right, the media frenzy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's where the media goes into absolute overdrive over a specific demographic, usually young, white, petite females.
Mm.
The narrative is easy for them to sell.
The narrative being, this person is vulnerable, they are a victim, they need saving immediately.
Yes. It creates an immediate sense of urgency. The public sees a photo and thinks she couldn't possibly be out there on her own.
But there's a flip side to that.
There is a converse to that phenomenon, often called reverse missing white woman syndrome, or simply the adult male bias.
The adult male bias.
Right. When law enforcement sees a young black man who's over 6 feet tall and broad-shouldered, there's often an implicit bias in their risk assessment.
They see someone who looks physically capable.
Exactly. They see an adult male who, statistically, isn't viewed as a victim in the same way a child or a smaller woman might be.
Right.
The assumption completely defaults to, he's a big guy, he'd take care of himself. If he's gone, he probably chose to go.
So the visual bias completely overrides the psychological reality. Because Keyonta's profile wasn't just his height. If you only look at the driver's license stats, you miss the entire story of how he was actually functioning.
You miss all the critical context. And this is the real tragedy of the surface-level assessment.
Yeah.
The sources make it very clear that Keyonta was a young adult with disabilities.
He required ongoing support.
Yes. He wasn't someone fully equipped to navigate complex predatory environments entirely on his own. He had cognitive vulnerabilities that meant he processed the world differently than that 6'1" frame would suggest to a total stranger.
But, and this is a really important nuance in the sources that I think is fascinating, he wasn't helpless.
No.
He wasn't someone who was just sitting at home waiting for life to happen to him. He craved independence. He was in that transition phase that so many young people with disabilities go through.
Right.
He didn't live at home with Angie anymore. He had roommates. He wanted to be his own man.
That desire for autonomy is so powerful. It's a universal human drive.
Right.
But for Keyonta, that drive for independence also created a very specific kind of exposure. He wanted to prove he could do it.
And he had a job. I think this is such a key detail that gets lost when people think of missing vulnerable adults. We often think of them as isolated or shut-ins.
Right, we picture them disconnected.
But Keyonta wasn't drifting. He worked part-time at an adult daycare center. The reports say he took immense pride in this job.
And why is that specific detail of the job so important for our analysis? Because it establishes structural integration.
Structural integration.
Yes, when we look at missing persons cases, people who are transient or off the grid or suffering from severe addiction that keeps them moving constantly.
They are harder to track.
Much harder because they don't have a baseline routine.
Yeah.
But Keyonta had a routine. He had a schedule. He had coworkers.
He had a place to be every day.
Exactly. If he didn't show up for work, there were people who would notice. If he didn't call his mom, she would notice. He was tethered to a community structure.
Yeah.
He wasn't invisible in his daily life.
Mm-hmm.
He was very much visible and integrated.
Speaking of tethering, let's look at that family connection. This is the baseline against which the entire disappearance is measured. Because you can't know something is wrong unless you know what right looks like.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
We established he didn't live with Angie. But the sources emphasize they are in regular contact.
Regular contact.
This wasn't a relationship where they went weeks or months without speaking. This was habitual. It was a lifeline for both of them. She
Yeah.
checked in, she checked in.
Which brings us right back to the unbaked cake scenario from the start. You have a birthday visit, you have a plan for the next day, you have a lunch break call. And then
Absolute silence.
absolute silence.
In profiling, we call this red flag behavior. When you are assessing a disappearance, you look for deviations from the established baseline.
Right.
For a person with Keyonta's specific psychological profile, the habitual contact, the reliance on family support, the sheer excitement of a birthday ritual, ghosting a celebration is a massive indicator of foul play or a severe catastrophe.
It's not just a skipped meeting.
No, it is simply not consistent with voluntary absence.
It was, to quote Angie directly from the sources, completely out of character.
Completely out of character.
He didn't just forget. He didn't just decide to skip his own cake. Something stopped him. And when a mother says he wouldn't do this and the documented history completely backs her up, that should be the loudest alarm bell possible.
And yet that intuition from the family, that absolute certainty that the pattern had been broken by force, not by choice, was not enough to get the gears of the official system turning immediately.
Which perfectly leads us to the most baffling and, frankly, infuriating part of this deep dive, the timeline.
The timeline crisis.
And I'm not talking about a confusion of hours here, like was he seen at 4 p.m. or 5 p.m.? I'm talking about a discrepancy of months.
And honestly, looking at the data we have, this discrepancy is arguably the single biggest factor in why this case remains unsolved nearly 6 years later. It's a profound structural flaw in the investigation.
Let's lay out the two timelines side by side so you, the listener, can really hear the dissonance here. First, let's look at the family's timeline. The reality that Angie actually lived.
Right. The sequence is clear and heavily corroborated by the family. Birthday visit in March, phone call the next day, silence immediately following.
And we really need to contextualize March 2020. I mean, think back to that exact month. It wasn't just a normal March, it was the month the entire world changed.
It was essentially a perfect storm for disappearance. March 2020 was the onset of the global COVID-19 lockdowns.
I remember.
Cities were turning into absolute ghost towns. Social isolation wasn't just happening naturally, it was mandated by the government. Yes. Schools closed, businesses shuttered, people were told to stay inside and not interact.
So if you go missing in that specific window, there are simply fewer people on the street to witness anything.
Precisely. The eyes on the street concept, which is vital for urban safety, this idea that neighbors and passersby act as a sort of informal surveillance network, that was totally gone.
The streets were completely empty.
Plus, think about the institutions themselves at that moment. The police are totally overwhelmed with enforcing new health mandates, managing public panic, dealing with their own staffing shortages due to the virus.
Right.
Hospitals are chaotic. If someone vanishes in March 2020, the societal mechanism for noticing they're gone is deeply fractured. It created a literal cloak of invisibility around his disappearance.
So Angie knows he went missing in March. She knows he didn't come for the cake. But then we look at the police bulletins, we look at the official record, and here is where it gets really interesting in a deeply disturbing way.
Yeah.
The official police reports list his missing date as May 7th, 2020.
That is a 2-month gap.
2 months, 60 days. The report literally says he was reported missing at 10:30 a.m. from the 400 block of South Bentalus Street on May 7th.
Think about the investigative implications of that specific error.
Yeah.
This isn't just a typo on a form.
No.
If the police are working off a May 7th date, everything they do is calibrated to that date. They are looking for witnesses who saw him in May.
Right.
They are pulling security footage for May. They are pinging cell towers for May. But if he actually vanished in March, they are investigating a ghost. They are searching in the wrong time entirely.
How does this even happen? How does a mother scream March and the police calmly write down May?
This brings us back to a systemic concept that's often called the right to go missing.
Right to go missing.
When Angie tried to report him missing in March, the sources tell us she was initially turned away. The police response was, essentially, he is 21, he is a legal adult, he doesn't have to call you if he doesn't want to.
And I mean, I understand the civil liberty aspect of that. Adults do have the right to cut off their families. They have the right to leave town without telling anyone. But in this specific context...
It's a very delicate balance, certainly. We don't want a police state where you can't leave your house without reporting your movements to the authorities.
Yeah.
But in this specific case, the system failed to apply any nuance.
Zero nuance.
Because of his documented disabilities and his established routine, Keyonta should have been categorized as a vulnerable adult immediately.
Immediately.
That classification is a legal trigger. It overrides the right to go missing entirely. It says this person may not be capable of safely caring for themselves, so their sudden absence is inherently dangerous.
Which should force action.
That triggers an immediate full-scale investigation. But that categorization simply didn't happen for him.
So Andrea is essentially left waiting, trying to find him herself, for 2 full months.
It appears that May 7th represents the date the police finally processed the report or officially opened the active file. It's likely a bureaucratic clerical date, not a factual one regarding his actual disappearance.
Right.
Or, perhaps even more confusingly, the police report implies a sighting on May 7th. But if he was actually seen on May 7th, that implies he ignored his family for 2 full months during the height of a pandemic, which contradicts absolutely everything we know about his baseline behavior.
It makes no sense.
It implies he was alive and well and just ignoring his mom, which perfectly fits the he's an adult narrative, but completely fails to fit the Keyonta narrative.
And what is the actual cost of that bureaucratic delay? What did we lose in those 2 months?
We lost the golden hour.
The golden hour.
In any investigation, the first 24 to 48 hours are absolutely critical. That's when memories are fresh. If you ask a clerk, hey, did you see a tall guy in a red shirt yesterday? They might actually remember.
Right.
If you ask them, did you see a tall guy in a red shirt 2 months ago? They have absolutely no idea.
And it's not just human memory. It's the technology.
Exactly. Security cameras. Most business and residential systems operate on a continuous loop. They keep footage for 48 hours, maybe 7 days, very rarely 30 days.
So it's gone.
By the time the police started looking in May, even if they had looked back to March, the footage from March would have been overwritten weeks ago. The digital evidence simply evaporated.
Wow.
By delaying the official case opening from March to May, investigators essentially started the race 2 months after the starting gun went off. The trail wasn't just cold, it was frozen solid.
That image of the frozen trail is really hard to shake. Let's shift from the timeline to the geography, because the environment really matters here. Baltimore isn't just a backdrop in this case. It's a character in the story.
It absolutely is.
The streets he walked, the places he went, they hold clues.
They do. And the sources highlight 2 very specific, very different locations within the city that paint a picture of Keyonta's life and potentially his last movements.
First, we have the area the police specifically noted he frequented, Charles Street and North Avenue.
This is a major, major intersection. It's a hub. It connects different demographic parts of the city. And the police report specifically mentions that Keyonta associated with squeegee kids in this area.
We should probably unpack that term for listeners who aren't from Baltimore or maybe don't know the specific urban culture there. Squeegee kids.
Right. This is a very specific subculture and economic reality in Baltimore. You have groups of young people, mostly young men, who congregate at busy intersections. When the traffic light turns red, they rush out to wash windshields for tips.
It's a hustle. It's a street economy. It's entrepreneurial in a way.
It is a completely unregulated street economy. And while for many it's really just a way to put some cash in their pocket to buy lunch or help out their families, it carries significant risks, especially for a vulnerable adult like Keyonta.
Because it's unregulated.
Yes, it's a high-stress, fast-paced environment.
What kind of specific risks are we talking about here?
Well, first, the physical danger. You are walking in active traffic. Cars are moving. We've seen plenty of news stories about aggressive drivers or tragic accidents.
Right.
But more importantly for Keyonta's profile, it's the peer dynamics. It's an environment where territory and money matter immensely. Groups can be fiercely territorial.
Yeah.
If you are passive or if you have developmental vulnerabilities, you are at a very high risk of being exploited by predatory peers within that loose group structure.
Because it's not a structured, safe workplace like the adult daycare center he worked at. It's the street. There's no HR department to complain to.
Exactly. It demands a level of street smarts and rapid social calculation that Keyonta might not have possessed, or at least might have seriously struggled with. If there's a dispute over tip money or corner territory, it can escalate incredibly fast.
Then we have the second location mentioned in the sources, the 400 block of South Bentilus Street. This is where the police actually say he went missing from on that official May 7th date.
Which is fascinating because this is a residential area in the Southwest District. It's quite a distance from the Charles Street intersection hustle. It's a neighborhood of row houses, porches, sidewalks. It's a living space, not a working intersection.
And the time listed is 10:30 a.m.
Which is highly significant. 10:30 a.m. on a weekday. Ideally, Keyonta should be at his job at the daycare center.
Right.
Or he should be asleep if he somehow worked a late shift elsewhere, though daycare usually operates during normal business hours.
Right.
Being on a residential block at 10:30 a.m. strongly suggests his normal routine had already been shattered.
Definitely.
Was he living there? Was he visiting someone specific?
If he wasn't at work and he wasn't with his mom, who was he with?
Yeah.
That's the question that leads us to the darker side of this deep dive, the motive. Because people rarely disappear into thin air without a reason.
We so often look for complex, mysterious motives in true crime cases, serial killers, random stranger abductions. But sadly, the motive here appears to be incredibly tangible, incredibly banal almost.
Yeah.
Financial exploitation.
The sources recount these conversations Keyonta had with Angie in the weeks leading up to his disappearance. He was actually opening up to her. He was worried. He wasn't just happy-go-lucky anymore.
He explicitly confessed that he was having trouble with the people he lived with, his roommates.
And the accusation was very specific. He didn't just say, they're mean to me or we don't get along. He told his mother they were taking his money. They were using his disability benefits.
What's fascinating and deeply disturbing here is the actual economics of predatory living. We see this exact pattern in criminology, specifically regarding SSI supplemental security income.
Explain how that dynamic works, because for most people, a disability check is just an administrative thing. How does it become a literal motive for harm?
Well, for a vulnerable adult, that monthly government check represents pure survival. It pays for food, rent, independence.
Right.
But to a predator, that person is essentially a walking asset. They are a financial instrument. We see cases where roommates or unofficial caregivers, sometimes people who initially present themselves as close friends, they systematically isolate a vulnerable person, specifically to harvest that steady government income.
They just take over.
Yes, they control the bank card, they learn the PIN, they take the cash in the ATM and give the victim just barely enough to survive, keeping the rest for themselves.
It's a steady stream of cash that renews every single month. And Keyonta told his mom this was happening to him. He was totally aware of it.
He was aware. And Angie, being a fierce, protective mother, tried to intervene. She naturally wanted to step in and fix it. But, and this is so heartbreakingly common in these sociological cases, Keyonta pushed back.
He resisted the help.
He wanted to prove his independence. He insisted he could handle the roommates himself.
The dignity of risk. We've talked about this concept before. He didn't want his mom to come save him because that would mean admitting he couldn't make it on his own in the adult world. It's a brutal catch-22.
Exactly. He wanted to solve it himself. He wanted to be the adult he felt he was. But you really have to consider the timing again. March 2020.
Right, the lockdowns.
The pandemic hits, the entire economy crashes overnight.
Right.
Waiters, bartenders, retail workers, everyone is suddenly losing their income.
And if the adult daycare center closes temporarily due to the lockdown mandates,
Then Keyonta immediately loses his wages. He loses his legitimate part-time income.
so the disability check becomes the absolute only asset.
Exactly. In a rapidly shrinking economy, that guaranteed government check becomes infinitely more valuable. It becomes the only reliable lifeline in the house. And if Keyonta was threatening to leave or actively threatening to cut off access to those funds because he was tired of being exploited,
He becomes a problem.
he becomes a massive liability to the very people stealing from him.
So the motive for disappearance links directly to him trying to stop the theft.
That is the leading criminological hypothesis here. It's a brutal calculation. If he leaves, the money leaves. If he stays but fights back, he's a problem that needs to be solved.
Right.
Foul play becomes a method of either forcibly retaining the asset or covering up the theft that has already happened.
It just raises so many unanswered questions. Have these roommates been thoroughly investigated? Did the use of his benefits continue after March?
Or even after May. This is exactly where that timeline discrepancy becomes a massive obstruction to justice.
Yes.
If the police genuinely think he went missing in May, did they even check if his ABT or bank card was used in April?
Oh, man.
If they see activity in April, they might just think, oh, he was alive and spending money then, so he wasn't missing yet.
Right.
But if the predator had the card, the activity wasn't Keyonta, it was the person who took him.
Right.
If they didn't look at the bank records for March and April because they didn't think he was missing yet, the trail of money, which is usually the easiest trail for police to follow, might have been completely ignored until it was way too late. Money always leaves a trail, but you have to actually know when to look for it.
This brings us to the systemic friction we keep circling back to. We've touched on it, but we need to really look at the advocacy gap.
The gap between the family and the system.
Yes, because it feels like Angie was fighting a war on two entirely different fronts. She was trying to find her son on the streets, and she was trying to get the police to care enough to look.
She was fighting the institutional perception of the invisible. She was fighting to make her son visible to a system that seemed essentially designed to look right past him.
We mentioned that initial police response. He's an adult.
That phrase acts as a bureaucratic shield for inaction. It's a stop sign. By failing to categorize Keyonta as a vulnerable adult despite his clear disabilities, the system completely failed to trigger the protocols designed to protect people exactly like him.
It's tragic.
It treated him as a fully capable agent who just walked away on a whim, rather than a vulnerable person at extreme risk.
Angie feels that little effort was made. And honestly, looking at the discrepancy in dates, looking at the 2 months of lost time, it's really hard to argue with her assessment.
We also have to have the uncomfortable conversation about demographics here.
Yeah.
Keyonta was a young black man in an urban environment. Historically and statistically, these specific cases receive significantly fewer resources and far less media attention than others.
If a 21-year-old college student from the affluent suburbs vanished on her birthday, leaving her cake unbaked, that timeline discrepancy likely would have been resolved in 24 hours because the public pressure would have been immense.
The media trucks would have been parked directly outside the police station. There would have been organized search parties with dogs. But for Keyonta, it's 6 years later, and we are relying on independent media to fill the void. The pressure simply wasn't applied in the same way by the traditional institutions.
And that highlights a major shift in modern criminal justice. Podcasts like The Vanished, episode 516 specifically, they are doing the groundwork that detectives used to do.
They are.
They are reconstructing the timeline. They are interviewing the family years later to keep the record straight.
It's basically crowdsourcing justice. They are reaching out to people who might have been in the squeegee scene in 2020.
Which is smart.
People who would never talk to a uniformed police officer, whether because of historic trust issues or fear of retaliation. They might actually talk to a podcaster. They might send an anonymous tip to a website. The media landscape is rapidly becoming the investigative landscape.
The sources also mention a broader pattern here. This isn't just Keyonta. It's not an isolated freak incident.
No. The Vanished also covered the case of Michael Terrell Green in episode 515.
What's the connection there? Why link them?
Michael disappeared in early March 2020 as well. Same exact time frame, same city context in Baltimore, and the details are eerily similar. His social media went completely dark. He was digitally erased.
Digitally erased. That's a terrifying phrase. It sounds almost sci-fi, but it's our reality.
It is the modern missing phenomenon. We leave so many digital footprints every single day. Phones, social media logins, bank card swipes, GPS location
They're
vans.
always tracked.
When those all stop at once, it's a silence that should scream to investigators. It's not a gradual fading away, it's a hard, abrupt stop.
Yeah.
For both Keyonta and Michael, the digital silence was immediate, yet the official response was incredibly slow. It shows a much broader issue of how we handle missing persons cases in the digital age, especially when the victims are men of color. The system is just too slow to recognize the digital silence as an actual physical emergency.
So here we are. It's been nearly 6 years. The cake mix is long gone. The world has entirely moved on from the lockdowns. We're all back to normal. But Angie is still waiting.
She is still waiting.
Yeah.
And she is still advocating for it. She hasn't let the silence win.
Let's summarize the tragedy here before we close out. We have a mother who just wanted to bake a birthday cake for her son. We have a son who wanted to be independent, but was allegedly being actively exploited by the very people he lived with. And we have a 2-month bureaucratic gap in the records where the truth is likely hiding.
That chasm between March and May is the black box of this entire investigation. Somewhere in those 60 days, between the birthday phone call on his lunch break and the police report being filed, Keyonta Davis's fate was permanently sealed.
The strongest lead undoubtedly remains the roommates and the financial exploitation.
Absolutely. That is a tangible, actionable motive. It's not a random encounter. It involves specific people who knew him, who had access to his life, and who directly benefited from his silence. It's a very small, defined circle of suspects.
So what can actually be done? If you were listening to this deep dive right now, and you were in Baltimore in 2020, maybe you were part of that squeegee culture on Charles Street and North Avenue. Maybe you lived near South Benellis Street. Maybe you knew the roommates.
Someone knows exactly what happened. Disappearances like this usually require the silence of others to remain unsolved. Someone knows why he didn't come home for his birthday cake.
The contact info you need is the Baltimore Police Department Missing Persons Unit. The number is 443-983-7385. Share the story, talk about it, because, like we said, the official record might be wrong, but human memory might still hold the key.
And this raises a final, really provocative thought for everyone listening to take away. We like to think we live in a massive surveillance state.
Yeah.
Cameras everywhere, phones tracking our every single move.
Yeah.
We think it's practically impossible to truly disappear today.
Right.
But Keyonta Davis, a 6'1" man, essentially ceased to exist on his 21st birthday. And the system didn't even officially notice for 2 whole months.
That really makes you wonder.
If the system is recording his disappearance in May, when he actually vanished in March, are we just searching for him in the wrong place? Or, significantly more terrifyingly, are we searching for him in the wrong time entirely?
That is a chilling thought. We'll leave you with that. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.
Take care.